Hollywood has a history of indulging itself, and many of the most stunning films of all time are the result of incredible budgets. With adjustments for inflation, classic historical epics like Ben-Hur and Cleopatra are just as pricey as the blockbusters of today. A film's budget and box office performance can change the way that the industry operates and inspire new trends. In the case of Ben-Hur, Hollywood saw a future in epic storytelling with elaborate sets and set pieces. In the case of Cleopatra, the film's failure marked an end to this fruitful period of movie stars and signified the dawn of the new Hollywood era. Today, we're taking a look at the top 10 most expensive movies ever made. 10. John Carter, 2012. John Carter was finally released in March of 2012 after years of lingering and development hell. Disney was keen on delivering another live-action epic that could rival the success of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. And for a brief moment, it seemed like Taylor Kitsch would be the biggest movie star of his generation. Unfortunately, John Carter's ballooning budget of $264 million was unable to draw in audiences, which sadly ended the presumed franchise before it had the chance to take off. 9. T.I. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, 2019. Where to start with Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker? The production of the final installment in the Star Wars sequel trilogy was hit with setbacks at the very beginning due to the tragic loss of Carrie Fisher, and swapped Colin Trevorrow out for J.J. Abrams in a last-minute change. Its budget ended up at $275 million. Unfortunately, The Rise of Skywalker was a major blunder that squashed the inventiveness of The Last Jedi and the promise of The Force Awakens. While the film still managed to cross the box office $1 billion mark, it's notably the last theatrical Star Wars film that we've seen in theaters. 8. Tai. Solo: A Star Wars Story, 2018. Also coming in at $275 million, Solo: A Star Wars Story suffered a major director swap, except this time it came after shooting was nearly completed. Ron Howard stepped in to replace Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and the film had a botched marketing campaign that didn't begin until a Super Bowl advertisement 3 months before its release date. In an unusual move, Disney decided to open the Star Wars prequel film only 3 weeks after Avengers Infinity War, and effectively buried an underrated film that deserved to not only be remembered for its budget. 7. Tai. Justice League, 2017. Production issues tend to dominate the most expensive films ever, and the story behind the $300 million Justice League is far more interesting than either version of the film. After Zack Snyder left the production, Joss Whedon effectively reshot the film in order to rebound from the critical failure of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. However, it seems like the previous DCEU installments had burned fans too hard, as Justice League failed to become a critical and financial success on the level of the Avengers. $300 million wasn't enough to make Henry Cavill's digitally erased mustache convincing. 6. Tai. Pirates of the Caribbean: At World's End, 2007. The third film in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise is certainly a film where every inch of the $300 million budget can be seen on screen. Between an elaborate escape from a watery afterlife to one of the most ridiculous ship battles in film history, Pirates of the Caribbean: At World's End utilizes all the wonders of visual effects and practical world-building to create one of the weirdest and most fulfilling blockbusters in recent memory. 5. Avengers Infinity War, 2018. Avengers Infinity War somehow did the impossible and brought together a decade of storytelling into a coherent narrative that balanced all of the heroes. The hefty $325 million price tag for uniting these heroes paid off, and Infinity War became the first Marvel film to pass the $2 billion box office threshold. 4. Avatar: The Way of Water, $350 million. While its box office story is still unfolding for the second Avatar movie, it's safe to say that the film will continue to dominate the charts for the next month as audiences return to the world of Pandora. Avatar: The Way of Water is another film where you can see the results of the price tag on screen. The stunning underwater photography and epic action sequences somehow managed to top the visual achievements of its predecessor. 3. Avengers Endgame, 2019. Avengers Endgame, released in 2019, was an epical moment not just for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, but for global cinema at large. With a budget of $356 million, it was slightly less expensive than its predecessor, Avengers Age of Ultron, but its impact was arguably much greater. Directed by the Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe, the film served as the climactic finale to the sprawling Infinity Saga, which spanned 22 films over more than a decade. The movie assembled an unprecedented ensemble cast, bringing back characters from all corners of the MCU. With a runtime of about 3 hours, it managed to weave multiple story arcs, time travel elements, and universe-altering stakes into a coherent and emotionally resonant narrative. Its plot was a monumental undertaking that not only resolved the cliffhanger from its direct predecessor, Avengers Infinity War, but also aimed to offer a satisfying conclusion to story arcs that had been developing since the MCU's inception in 2008. One of the most talked about aspects of Endgame was its climactic battle scene, which is often cited as one of the largest and most ambitious ever put to film. The sequence required complex choreography between numerous characters, each with their unique abilities and fighting styles, as well as cutting-edge visual effects to render the intergalactic spectacle. Critically, the film was lauded for its ability to provide a satisfying end to multiple long-running character arcs. Characters like Tony Stark, Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr., and Steve Rogers, Captain America, Chris Evans, were given send-offs that were both emotionally impactful and narratively fitting, provoking heartfelt reactions from audiences who had grown attached to these characters over years or even decades. 2. Avengers Age of Ultron, 2015. Age of Ultron, released in 2015, had a prodigious budget of $365 million, making it the most expensive film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, as of my last update in September 2021. Directed by Joss Whedon, who also helmed the first Avengers film in 2012, Age of Ultron aimed to bring back the magic of its predecessor, which had been a massive critical and commercial success. In Age of Ultron, the star-studded ensemble cast reassembled, featuring Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk, Chris Evans as Captain America, Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, and Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. James Spader provided the voice for the film's antagonist, Ultron, a sentient artificial intelligence that turns against humanity. The film also introduced new characters like Vision, Paul Bettany, Scarlet Witch, Elizabeth Olsen, and Quicksilver, Aaron Taylor Johnson. The movie continued the ambitious storytelling that the MCU had become known for, focusing on themes of power, responsibility, and the ethical implications of artificial intelligence. Its significant budget was evident in its grand scale, special effects, and action sequences. These funds allowed for breathtaking CGI and complex fight choreography, contributing to the film's blockbuster status. 1. Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, $378 million. Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides holds the distinction of being one of the most expensive films ever made, with a production budget of approximately $378 million. Released in 2011, this fourth installment in Disney's highly successful Pirates of the Caribbean franchise brought back Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow, a role that had become iconic and inextricably tied to the actor himself. Directed by Rob Marshall, replacing Gore Verbinski, who directed the original trilogy, the film sought to breathe new life into the series. With a storyline inspired by the 1987 novel On Stranger Tides by Tim Powers, the film delved into the quest for the Fountain of Youth and featured other notable cast members like Penelope Cruz and Ian McShane. It added elements of mysticism and fantasy, aiming to reinvigorate the franchise with fresh characters and exotic locales. Despite the enormous budget, which included the cost of intricate sets, special effects, and shooting in 3D, the film received mixed reviews from both critics and audiences. Many found it to be an overindulgent affair that failed to capture the charm and excitement of the original trilogy. The general consensus suggested that the narrative was stretched thin and that the franchise might be suffering from sequel fatigue. However, from a financial standpoint, On Stranger Tides was far from a flop. It successfully crossed the $1 billion mark at the global box office, proving that the appetite for swashbuckling adventures, especially those featuring Captain Jack Sparrow, was far from over. The film's financial success indicated the enduring popularity of the franchise and demonstrated that, despite criticisms, a huge budget can sometimes translate into equally enormous box office returns.